Pfizer has announced a short while ago, in fact earlier this evening India time, that its stage 3 trials for its COVID-19 vaccine have shown an efficacy of 90%. A lot of medical experts around the world have hailed this as a breakthrough moment. The Pfizer CEO, in conversation with global news networks, has said this could be the biggest medical advancement in the last 100 years, considering the scale and impact of what it would be to have a vaccine that works with an efficacy of 90%. In fact, this has led to a huge boom in markets all across the world. European markets were on fire. We're seeing what's happening in the United States markets. Wall Street is just crazy right now. Over 4.5% up on the Dow Jones, up over 1,200 points, 1231. The Nasdaq up over 200 points at this point, and the S&P also up about 3.5%. I'm going to speak now to Ben Emons and Seth Freeman, who are joining us to take us through what's going on in the markets. Ben, why the joy over the Pfizer vaccine announcement? What is it expected to lead to, and how are markets looking at this development?
Well, as you outlined from the start of the segment, the 90% efficacy, and actually the Pfizer CEO was on US networks this morning, that it's actually more than 90% efficacy, and the ability to have a vaccine that can be developed in the future to deal with this COVID crisis if it mutates, right? So in other words, it's just much longer lasting protection. And that's the breakthrough. And I think this is what markets are now pricing in, that what you're seeing is that the leisure hospitality sectors and major indices are up like 10, 20% in a lot of these individual leisure hospitality stocks. You see it in bond yields rising really quickly, because what markets are saying is like a vaccine like this allows us to normalize activity faster than what was initially anticipated. Many markets thought it would maybe be by the end of next year. This may be as soon as the first or second quarter of next year. I think that's what you're seeing in markets today. That explains the euphoria.
Markets are also responding to so much news right now. Seth, put that all in context with us, for us. The Biden final announcement came in over the weekend that he is projected to be the president-elect, the next president of the United States. Then you have this Pfizer news coming in. What are the various, aspects that the market is dealing with right now?
Absent this announcement from Pfizer, I think we would have seen a substantial piece of this bump in any case, because of some of the uncertainty of both the outcome of the election and what 2021 is going to look like. But it's absolutely critical that a vaccine be identified, or more than one vaccine, that can really have, a 90% super high efficacy rate, because that is going to give hope for some getting back to some degree of what we think of as being normal, and people going back to work and so forth. However, and not to be a negative about this at all, the availability of the vaccine and actually distributing it and getting people to use it is a whole nother story.
It's an important point you've made, Seth. And just as an aside, I was speaking a little while earlier to medical experts here in India to understand the Indian context. And one of them told me that the vaccine has to be stored at -70 to -80 degrees Celsius. That's one issue, at least in a country like India. And the other thing is that it's an RNA vaccine, so it's likely to be more expensive than the other versions that are being worked on. But then, of course, we're waiting for more information to come in. Ben, is it just the vaccine and the fallout of that the markets are pricing in, or are they looking forward to more positive news flow?
It was the other relief over the weekend, and that was of course expected, that we would have an outcome on the election and that there's no longer a contested outcome. So that does play a role in the background. Plus, we do have the Georgia Senate race runoff, which could still determine a different majority in the Senate, thereby again opening up expectations for next year to see a larger fiscal stimulus do come through without too many roadblocks. That's another positive development in the background here as this vaccine news comes along. Then, of course, we're going to get earnings again this week in the United States, which continue to show robust strength there. And the data that was on Friday, the payroll data, the employment data was much stronger than expected. So we are at a juncture here where you have a vaccine news that's positive, an election that's determined, and an economy that continues to strengthen. So I think that's all the mix of lifting U.S. markets and thereby tipping that over to foreign markets. Whereby I want to note that the markets are up to date, particularly in Europe, are really strong because countries like France and Spain and so forth have been hit by the COVID crisis harder. And you see there also a lot of euphoria on the vaccine news. I think that's all the positive news here from here.
Seth, going forward, how important will the ability to hammer out a proper program by the government be, by the Biden administration, to get the Senate, to get the Congress on board and get an incentives program on? Will the focus now shift to that after the Pfizer euphoria sort of recedes?
Well, the President-elect Biden in his speech said that, he sees the availability of the vaccine and the economy being tied together. And presidents have to have the cooperation of the Congress in order to implement their policies. And so your question is really, A, will we have a Democrat majority Senate? And as we just heard, it totally hinges on what happens in these Georgia runoffs. We're going to see a lot of money poured into those campaigns, those elections. And however, it's going to be much harder to implement the policies without the cooperation of a Senate that is not a majority Senate. The better part, the upside though here is that, President-elect Biden was a senator for many years. He has relationships. I'm hoping that the friction, the lack of cooperation, and the complete intransigence of the houses may subside with Biden as the president, and that there will be the kind of cooperation that used to be seen across the different parts of our U.S. government.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I want to thank both Ben and Seth for joining us on top of the show this evening and putting into perspective this euphoria over the Pfizer vaccine announcement.